Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Hey, it's Carter Bear, and you're listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast.
Welcome to episode 91 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Wolak, joined as always by my co-host, Devin Little. Devin, how are you doing?
All things considered, I'm doing pretty well. How you doing, Tony?
Not too bad. I was just thinking about episode 91, and if there's any Red Wings who wore that number before that we could reference, but none come to mind. What about you?
I got nothing. I know Eisman was 19, but that's flipped. I got nothing.
All right, well, we'll get back to you on that one, folks. In the meantime, Devin, you're getting married soon. How's the wedding planning been going?
You know, I sure am. We're getting down to the nitty gritty of it. We're a little under 4 months away. Planning's good. I think the biggest thing I have left to do is just kind of submit some final details. But outside of that, we're kind of just in a holding pattern until we get to November.
Good deal. Band or DJ?
DJ.
Nice. Good choice. Our DJ called in sick the morning of the wedding.
No.
But he's like, don't worry. The guy I DJ with, he's got you covered. I gave him all the songs that you guys want to play and don't want to play. And you know what? He sure did not follow that. But it was okay, though. It was okay. We had a great time. Everyone was drinking a lot. Half the people there were from the Midwest. Half the people there were from Eastern Shore, Maryland. And it's a blast. You got the tux picked out. You going blue? You going classic black? What are we thinking?
I'm going green, actually. Little change up there, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to wear that suit.
What's the story behind the green?
Kind of twofold. One, it's her favorite color, so I'm kind of being nice to her. I think she'll like how I look if I'm wearing her favorite color. And then just it's a November wedding, so we decided to kind of lean into it being winter time and pine trees and whatnot. So it's kind of leaning into the theme of the wedding a little bit.
I hope everything goes great for you guys. And
Thank you.
I mean, it's going to be a blur. What can I say? All right. So speaking of weddings, and this one did not last, unlike hopefully Devin's, and also mine for that matter. Wedding between Steve Yzerman and the Red Wings did not last. 7-year organization, and Yzerman got the 7-year itch, and covered this a bit last week. But as you all know, the Red Wings are looking for a new general manager currently. So what Devin and I wanted to do today is cover off whether the Red Wings should hire someone from like an internal hire or an external hire outside the organization for a fresh perspective. So we're going to share the pros and cons of those. In the meantime, as Evan would like to tell us, Evan has the night off today, but as Evan likes to tell us, make sure to tell everyone where to follow us. And you can follow us on X at Flying Octopod or on YouTube at The Flying Octopod. So make sure to subscribe, make sure to download, make sure to like. So anyway, Devin, let's get into it. When we we're talking about this idea. We drew straws. I was going to take internal hire and you were going to take external hire. We covered this a little bit last week. I know Evan was dead set on an external hire. So Detroit does have a few solid candidates internally if they want to hire someone from within. Sean Horkoff headlines the list along with Chris Draper and Nicholas Lidstrom. Just to rattle off some details real quick, Horkoff's been with the organization since 2016. He's been the general manager of the Grand Rapids Griffins since 2022. He knows the organization inside and out, has essentially been Yzerman's right-hand man since Yzerman really took over, for that matter. Chris Draper, another assistant general manager, he's been overseeing the amateur scouting department for the last several years. A little green compared to Horkoff, and then Nicholas Lidstrom, who joined the organization in 2023, I believe, rejoined them, for that matter. He's been a vice president of hockey operations, non-specialized, so he's kind of been floating between the different departments and getting a broad experience there. And that's not something you do come out of retirement to do unless you want to be a general manager or hold a higher position one day. So I throw him into the mix as well. But in my opinion, Horkoff is the leading candidate if the Red Wings are going to go internally, just because of his experience running a team in the Griffins and several good teams for that matter. He's been very involved in Yzerman's planning and decision-making over the past several years and has been involved in all facets of hockey operations as well in his role. So I'll pause there before I get into it and pass it over to Devin to talk about a few external candidates and the validity of hiring someone from the outside. Before we, dive deeper on this.
Well, when you're thinking about external candidates, whether it's the Red Wings or any organization that needs a new general manager, what you're going to immediately do is just point to the most successful organizations in the league right now and basically try to grab their assistant general manager. That's pretty much what all these teams do. So you look at Dallas, you look at Florida, you look at Carolina, Vegas, et cetera, et cetera. Whoever their second in command is, you interview that guy. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about last week. I'm not in this interview process. All these guys theoretically would do a great job. They've come from successful organizations, but I can't vouch for them. I'm not interviewing them. Maybe they would suck. I don't know. So you're going to want to at least, approach these people and, at least broker a conversation with them and see, just see where they're at, see if they're interested and see kind of what their approach to the job would be. But yeah, I'm not going to endorse anybody outside of the organization. However, I can make the argument to hire somebody from outside of the organization. I think without getting too deep into this, I think the biggest reason to hire somebody from outside of the organization is the Red Wings have been in the family for 30 years at this point. Jimmy Devellano, right, was the general manager for a good long while. Then eventually he handed it off to Ken Holland, who he mentored. Ken Holland was the general manager for a good long while, obviously had some success along the way, mentored Steve Yzerman. And then when it was Ken Holland's time to go away, Steve Yzerman took the job. And now we have Steve Yzerman, who had the job for some time, mentored Sean Horkoff. And now I agree with you. Sean Horkoff's kind of the leading internal candidate. We can keep doing what we're doing for the last 30 years. And it's, at least, they know they know the organization inside and out. They're familiar with, the state of Michigan and every asset that the state provides for the Red Wings. And you're familiar just on an organizational level from the top to the bottom. You know how ownership operates. So from just raw familiarity, that's a fantastic leg up that Horkoff has that nobody else really does outside of anyone else inside of the organization. But when you've been doing the same thing for 30 years and you're at this point where you could argue it's the ugliest period of time for the Red Wings, at least in the modern era, I think that if there has ever been a time to change course and hire outside of the organization, it is now, because we've done the protege mentor thing for 3 decades. If you want to see legitimate change, you can't keep doing the same thing. What's the definition of stupidity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Let's talk a little bit about the value in Sean Horkoff. As I mentioned, he knows the organization inside and out. And I feel like a lot of the pushback on an internal hire has been, it hasn't worked with Steve Yzerman. Why hire someone from his regime? Well, listen, this doesn't apply to just hockey. This is everywhere. If you have someone who's running things and they leave and you interview candidates to take over and their second in command wins the interview process and wins the job, they are not going to just continue what the previous person was doing. Almost never that happens. Because when you just think about a business example for a minute, and I touched on this last week too, is CEO leaves, COO, second in command, comes in to replace them after the interviewing process. They are not going to follow that person's playbook to a T. They're going to come in and want to make their own mark immediately to say, hey, look at me, I'm different and I'm better. And that's why you're going to remember me for a while after this. Not just carrying on the legacy of the past guy. That's not just because if Sean Horkoff gets the job, he is not going to be just continuing what Steve Yzerman did. No, he's going to want to do things his own way, and he's going to make changes to the roster how he sees fit, not what Yzerman had scribbled down for him before the interview. It's that I think is the biggest thing for people to get over, whether it's Yzerman, Draper, or Lidstrom. They are not Steve Yzerman, and they're going to do things their own way. So let's just get that out of the way. And I feel if you hire, say, Jim Mills second in command, or Eric Tulsky second in command, or Kelly McCrimmon second in command, they are not going to do things how their former boss did things. Sure, they may have picked up some best practices along the way, but you can say that about anyone. But there's things that their previous boss did that they didn't like, they're not going to keep doing them. I think that is something that just should be acknowledged for any candidate, is they are their own person and they're going to make decisions on their own. And it's what their ideas are, what their strategy is, that's pitching the Red Wings, that's getting them this job, not because of anything else.
I would agree. And I think to kind of further your point, I can bounce back and forth here. There's good arguments being made on both sides here. We saw that with Steve Yzerman, right? As much as there were a lot of similarities in terms of how he managed the organization and Ken Holland did. Yzerman still was his own man, and he did do things differently. I still think back to Ty Goes to the Veteran days with Ken Holland and just the contrast between that and Lucas Raymond making the team in his first shot and Emmett Finney making the team this past season. Like, I don't know that either of those things happened if Ken Holland was still the Red Wings general manager. That alone is like proof that as much as Yzerman was clearly mentored by Ken Holland, he was his own guy and he did approach the job differently. I think that you should expect Sean Horkoff or Chris Draper or whoever else, even if they were mentored by Steve Yzerman, they're not going to be an Yzerman clone. They are going to, take lessons that they were taught by Yzerman or whoever else, but they will approach the job in their own way. I mean, at the end of the day, anybody who's seeking a general manager position or any job like this in any equivalent industry, it's because you want to make the decisions. It's because you want to be the one that's in charge. If you're just kind of copying somebody else's playbook, then you're not really in charge. And I think that just kind of furthers the point here. If Sean Horkoff wants the job and he gets the job, it's because he's going to do the job his way, not just to kind of copy Yzerman's notes and continue the Yzer plan, so to speak.
Yeah, and everyone wants to leave their mark too. And you do that by having your own ideas, having your own unique take on the situation. Like Horkoff may have a similar structure as Yzerman in terms of the front office makeup, but the decisions he makes are going to be arrived at in a much different way than Yzerman did, because they're just two different people. And, as, we were talking about weddings earlier, me and my wife, we may have the same idea on something, but how we got there, very different, 100% different. But that's just because we're two different people. And with Horkoff specifically, since he, at least in my opinion, is the favorite, if they're going to hire internally, he's built the Griffins to be like a very strong AHL team over the past several years at this point. And sure, there's been top prospects coming in, but he's also made some good depth signings to bolster that team. He approached the building that team in a much different way than Yzerman would if he was in that position, or if Chris Draper, let's say Draper ends up doing that job. If Horkoff gets elevated, Draper will do things differently. That might be awkward with his son on the team, but topic for another day. But I just, that to me is like, for people who are outside the interview process, we just need to get over they just need someone new. Or if we bring in someone from the outside, they're going to be exactly like their old boss. It's just not how people operate.
Absolutely. I didn't bring any to show today, but there are plenty of examples across the NHL of teams or of organizations hiring somebody else's second in command, kind of hoping to just do what you did over there, and it doesn't work. For one reason or another, maybe the general manager very, very much so doesn't do what their previous boss did, and it's not works, or maybe just the factors of the organization itself don't allow the person to run things the same way. There's a lot of different factors that can go into how an organization is run. But case in point, like you said, you can hire, Vegas's second in command. That doesn't mean that you're going to all of a sudden turn into the Vegas Golden Knights. In fact, I would bet strongly that you would still be the Detroit Red Wings, because you're still in Michigan. You still have all the organizational just pillars, the organizational structure in place that you're just not going to completely take a wrecking ball to.
Let's talk about Vegas for a second, because this is what they did. George McPhee was their general manager, and then he took a step upstairs for positive reasons, and Kelly McCrimmon, his second in command, took over. And arguably, or not even arguably, just in a factual manner, McCrimmon has been more aggressive on the trade front and will cut through it with free agency and his own re-signings than McPhee was. The team took a step up after McCrimmon took over. And if you look at other examples around the league, Colorado did the same when Chris McFarland took over for Joe Sakic when Sakic moved upstairs. Alex Steen just took over for Doug Armstrong and St. Louis, and he's already left his mark with trades and signings there. So again, continuity is good from a historical knowledge perspective, but decisions are going to be different. And what I mean, but for historical knowledge, it's not just knowing who prospects are in your system, players and their idiosyncrasies. It's also knowing more nuanced things of Horkoff has been in the room with Yzerman having conversations with other general managers about the players. He understands the trade value of his own players better than any candidate out there. You can look at someone like, say, like Jason Spezza, for example, from Pittsburgh, who's going to be a general manager sooner rather than later. If he comes he's not going to have that knowledge right off the bat. So he's not going to know how the rest of the league feels about his players. He's got to have all those conversations first. Horkoff already knows how they feel about those players. So he can go in and make changes right away and know how other general managers are going to respond to it. So that's what I mean by historical knowledge. And that's not something that is easily gained, especially when there's so many players and prospects in the system.
I would agree. I think that that's actually an underrated thing in this conversation, especially given, the big thing hovering over this team aside from the general manager search. Whoever takes this job has to immediately address the Dylan Larkin situation. And it would, if you're bringing someone in from outside of the organization, realistically, like you just said, they have to kind of basically start from square one and kind of restart the talks and, gauge where everyone's at with Larkin's value and kind of go from there. Horkoff, you kind of pick up where Yzerman left off. Horkoff might value Larkin differently than Yzerman, or maybe he's more open to different ideas than Yzerman was, but he's jumping in on an ongoing conversation, not starting a new one about the same topic, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. And again, different opinions, even if you're coming from the same organization. Steve Yzerman wanted players to compete right now, top line players for Dylan Larkin. Sean Horkoff may be okay with futures. Another candidate outside the organization may feel the same way. We don't know. But again, Horkoff may not have the same opinion as Yzerman. He may see an easier path to getting this done and getting a good return as prospects and picks for Larkin, even if it means the team takes a step back. Now, Yzerman was under the gun to get something done and win right away. There may be some leeway given to Horkoff or whoever it is taking over, that's like, all right, well, we know you're stepping into like a messy situation. We'll give you a year or two to get things turned around. That's fine. Yzerman didn't have that luxury. Like he had been preaching patience for so long. It's not like Horkoff's going to come in here with, the gun to his head being like, all right, we got to win right away, because that's just unreasonable for him or any candidate. So it'll be interesting to see how he approaches the Dylan Larkin trade talks too.
Now to flip again to to my original argument, I guess the two biggest things that make me lean towards they should go outside the organization are, one, kind of what we were just saying, in terms of optics, not just within the organization, but the fan base, the people who pay the tickets and pay the play, like where the money comes from. Let's be honest. If you're hiring an Yzerman protege, I don't know that I think he'll get leeway because change is change, but I don't the same amount of rope, the same amount of leash that somebody outside of the organization would get. Because if you bring somebody outside of the organization, it's almost like you're bringing in a third party to assess the situation. You get have somebody doing an autopsy, that type of thing. And after thoroughly investigating, we've come to the determination that we need 3 years to rebuild. Like it's coming from outside of the organization, so like it kind of, I don't want to say it resets expectations, but it feels like a cleaner, like the slate's a little cleaner, basically. It feels like you can start from a point of we still have to build, versus Horkoff, where the slate might not be, like the slate's been cleaned a little bit, but there's definitely still marks from what was written before. You know how like a whiteboard, you wipe it off and there's maybe still like a little bit of like marks kind of left over. It's that type of thing. Like, yeah, the slate's clean, but it's not completely white. And so I guess that just kind of is my point. I think that somebody outside the organization maybe gets a bit more slack if the direction is to take a step back than Horkoff would. How much? I don't know, but I do think they would get more. And then the other thing that kind of leads me in that direction is it kind of goes back into there's pros and cons to both of this. It kind of goes back to the pro of familiarity with the organization. Now, the con of it is that you have relationships with people and you maybe don't want to fire people because you have relationships with people. You've been working with these people for 10 years. I think that if nothing else, the Detroit's pro scouting department needs to be seriously evaluated and given a legitimate makeover. And I feel more confident that somebody outside of the organization would be willing to take a wrecking ball to the Red Wings pro scouting department than Sean Horkoff would, because Sean Horkoff probably has friends in the pro scouting department. Now, obviously, everyone's a professional, and you got to do your job, whether even if that includes having hard conversations with people you like. But I don't necessarily think of Steve Yzerman as somebody who is sheepish and wouldn't deliver bad news to somebody if they needed to hear bad news. But the fact of the matter is that change didn't happen, and there were signs for years that the Red Wings pro scouting wasn't where it should be, and Yzerman didn't make the change. And if Yzerman didn't make the change, and we know how he is as a person, is Sean Horkoff really that much more ruthless? I don't know that he is. I'm not saying he wouldn't make any changes at the organizational level. I, in fact, would expect that he would. He'd have to some extent. But I don't know that he would enact the degree of change that is maybe needed here that an outside candidate maybe would.
So we discussed internal options, external options, the pros and cons. It's either way. I think the Red Wings are due for change, whether it's Horkoff, whether it's Scott White from Dallas or Darren York from Carolina, whoever it is, the Red Wings need change. They're due for change, and there will be change. Now, whether it's internal or external, we'll find out. What do you guys think? Comment on our YouTube page, comment on X. Let us know. Maybe not DM us. Let's make this a public discussion. We don't need you guys in your DMs. We got wives and fiancés. But anyway, let us know your thoughts. Also, let us know your thoughts on Patrick Kane signing with Chicago. I can't say I'm surprised. I did find it interesting the contract he got, 2 years, $8 million per year, 8-8 for 8-8. I mean, Chicago had the money. They could do that. That was a farewell contract for him to ride off into the sunset with the Blackhawks as they hopefully turn the corner. But can't say I was surprised. It was tough to see him go, though. I really did feel that, when Patrick Kane joined the Red Wings, there was a spark, because that was a future Hall of Famer choosing on his own accord to join the Red Wings when they were on the up and up, and he brought just some of that swagger, some of that just brought back the vibes to the Red Wings and made them a bit more relevant. So do appreciate all he did for the organization when he was here. Best of luck in Chicago, and thanks for the memories, 88.
Yeah, I for my part on this, it was a lot of fun watching Patrick Kane play in the winged wheel. I think this is a huge PR win for the Chicago Blackhawks, for sure. And honestly, a pretty big win for Connor Bedard. I still think that Lucas Raymond learned a lot and benefited greatly from his 3 seasons with Patrick Kane. I'm sure there are other players that would say the same thing, but I really focus in on Raymond with that. And I imagine that Connor Bedard is going to see a similar result over the next 2 years playing with Kane. Good for Kane. I kind of figured if he's not going to wear a winged wheel anymore, he's got to go back to wearing the Blackhawks jersey. That's where he made his name. That's where they're going to retire his jersey. He's a Blackhawk. That. It is what it is. Fun to see him play for the Red Wings, but to some extent, I also think this is probably necessary. I think that the Red Wings at times deferred to Kane when they maybe shouldn't have, because he's Patrick Kane. And I think that now that he's not on the roster anymore, you're going to have guys kind of be forced to step up because Kane's not there to protect them anymore.
That'll wrap things up for episode 91 of the Flying Octopus podcast. Thanks as always for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.